Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. Just echoing what Michelle said, if you have any questions along the way, since I'm going to be doing some illustrative examples, feel free to pop those messages into the chat and I will keep an eye on it, or Michelle will prompt me as she sees them come in. So before we get into our ChatGPT content, just want to tell you a little bit about the Angeletti Group. For those of you who don't know us, we are a full-service nonprofit consulting firm. We work across the nonprofit industry in a variety of sectors, really across the country. We do a lot of campaign planning work, a lot of feasibility study and assessment work, but we also have specialty areas in prospect research, strategic planning, executive search, staffing, and more. So we've been exposed to a lot of nonprofits and a lot of different challenges and opportunities at them. And the content coming to you today is a result of some of that work we've been doing. So why are we here today? So two goals on today's webinar. The first is to really understand how a platform such as ChatGPT can be applicable in our day-to-day development work, and then understand how to get the most out of it through a concept called prompt engineering, which we'll spend a lot of time on today, and I'll go into the details on just exactly how to do that, to structure and engineer your prompts to really get optimal results out of the platform. Before I do that, I have to give you this little disclaimer. I am not a computer person. I have no programming or computer science background. I have been using ChatGPT since it became, publicly available. Everything in this presentation, these guidelines and kind of tips and tricks are what I've learned through trial and error and application, at our clients. But if I can do it, so can you. So I just wanted to set the stage to let you know that I'm not in the back end really understanding all the programming behind ChatGPT. But it's okay, because you don't need to know how it works in order to use it. So what is ChatGPT? So ChatGPT, by definition, is a natural language processing chatbot driven by generative AI. Generative AI is a term that essentially means it's an AI tool that can create or generate content and outputs. So chatbot, if you're not familiar with that word, means that the format of use is that you're chatting essentially one-on-one with this tool. We're going to be using my ChatGPT 4.0 subscription today. ChatGPT itself is free for anyone to use and access at any time, simply by going to chatgpt.com. But there are some limitations to that free version. If you find yourself using it day in and day out, it may be worthwhile to consider upgrading to the newest version, which does have a fee associated. I think it's about $20 a month. There's also kind of enterprise plans for a company, and that's what we're using today at the Angeletti Group. But that upgraded version really adds some advanced capabilities, such as the ability to work with what they call GPTs, which kind of function as plugins or apps on your ChatGPT interface. It allows you to input more than just text, but also input spreadsheets, upload documents, add pictures. And perhaps most important for today's discussion is that it can handle more complex prompts. It can have more of a context-driven communication with you. So you might find that as you are working in the free version for a couple of weeks, you might find that you eventually do want to start paying for it, because you can get more out of it. Okay. Okay, so some of the popular AI platforms that I know people in our industry are using today, in addition to ChatGPT, there's Grammarly, which is specifically focused on writing and proofreading and sentence structure. There's Microsoft Copilot, which is almost a bit more of like a corporate solution to a language-based generative AI platform. There's Google Gemini, which is kind of Google's answer to Copilot, which is owned by Microsoft, and ChatGPT. There's another one growing in popularity called Claude.ai that I'm starting to hear people compare it to ChatGPT, and some people are finding that its writing style is a bit more human. And then there's Perplexity, which is really kind of hit the market and become known for its extensive abilities in the areas of research. But today, we're going to be focusing on ChatGPT specifically. So how big of a deal is this really? Is this just kind of a fad? Is this something, is this something we need to know about, for the future? It is definitely, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard this. It is definitely one of the fastest growing platforms that exists today. It set a record for the fastest growing user base in history. Within 2 months of it launching and becoming available for public use, it had 100 million active users, and they estimate that there are 180 million people using ChatGPT today, and 100 million of those are using it every week. A recent study earlier this year found that 20% of people reported that they do use ChatGPT at work. They use it to enhance or perform their job functions. And what I thought was really interesting is that number, just under a year prior, in March 2023, was only 8%. So the time is now. People are reaching out and saying, you know what, I'm going to learn and conquer this ChatGPT thing. This is when you want to get on board with the tool. And this is kind of I'm a big proponent of learning this platform and adopting it. Just like the internet, email, smartphones, just like they really transformed the way we connect and communicate at work, ChatGPT is the next step in this evolution. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Experts that are certainly more expert than me say that this is going to become an integrated part of most of our work styles and our work days. So kind of reiterating what I just said, don't get left behind. You're all here on this webinar, so that's great. You're interested, you're curious, you want to know how you can use ChatGPT. Use it now so you can become familiar and comfortable. I never would have thought I'd sit here and give a webinar about this topic, especially the first few times I used it. But as I used it day in and day out, to the point where I'm now using it multiple times a day, every day, I feel confident that I understand how the tool can support my work. And it did not take long to gain that confidence. So repetition and using it is really what will help you. All right. So let's jump into fundraising. So most everyone in the audience is in fundraising, or is a fundraiser, or is in a development office. So I like to organize the use cases across the spectrum of all the way from the basics, the simple, into the intermediate, all the way up to the advanced. So on a basic level, I think many people might have heard, this or seen examples of ChatGPT at work. On a basic level, it can create content such as an email that you need to send, a social media post, a cover letter. It can summarize information for you. Those of us who are in this industry, we know there's no shortage of reports and studies and articles coming out every single day. I try and set aside, 30 minutes a day to read them all, but it's a lot. So I often find that I'm asking a platform like ChatGPT to give me the high points and summarize some of those pieces that have come out. It can check for factual inaccuracies. And then my favorite use for it, I always tell people, I use it to say things better. It can really serve as your writing assistant to really enhance what you are writing and producing. Taking it slight step further into more of an intermediate territory, I would say the creative writing side of things is more intermediate. And I specifically put this word aid in creative writing because it is not a replacement for a true creative writing exercise for something like an annual fund appeal or a case for support. but it certainly can serve as a jumping off point and a brainstorm and a first draft to get to the point of a really robust, compelling, creatively written piece. It can also generate customized content or ideas based on information you give it. So for example, I use this one a lot in our executive search division. If you are hiring and you need some assistance determining interview questions, you can share with it your job description and say, what would be 10 interview questions that you would ask candidates who you're meeting with about this job? And it will synthesize information in the job description and suggest interview questions for you. You can also use it at the intermediate level for your own kind of education. You can use it, you can ask it to analyze trends or explain concepts to you. So a really good example is, we've talked a lot about this concept of social impact investing and what it means for our industry. And it's not something that I talk about every day. So it's helpful for me to go to something like ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to explain it to me, a couple of times, just to really refresh my understanding of the concept. And then on the advanced level, it can perform in-depth data analysis. It can compile detailed reports. It can develop action plans and iterate with you on a complete, full strategic plan or grant proposal. Most of the advanced uses do require the paid version, but it's really limitless in what it can achieve there. You can see from this little pointer finger where we're talking today. I would say we're somewhere between the basics and kind of pressing into the intermediate territory with some of our examples and approaches today. So just drilling down on these use cases a little bit further, we've identified kind of 5 overarching categories for what fundraisers might decide to use ChatGPT for. So the first one, and probably the most used and the most prevalent, would be creating. So generate communications, asking ChatGPT to assist you in writing fundraising appeals, refining your acknowledgement letters, creating marketing content, creating newsletters for you, writing an email for you. I find that is the most practical application that myself and my clients use. But then the additional categories that we're going to open up, definitely use them a couple of times a week. So you can also use it to personalize content. So for example, if you've written an appeal letter and you have a list of donors that will receive this letter, you can have ChatGPT change the letter slightly or customize it and create multiple versions based on audience segments. So if you want, if you import a list of donors and you include their funding interest, you can have the letter customized as many different ways as you want for people who are interested in that. I do see a question that's come in. When asking for a summary of articles and news, like you mentioned, does it get behind paywalls, Chronicle of Philanthropy, or the Wall Street Journal? So short answer, no. You can't, especially on the free version, you can't include a link and say, go to this link and read it and summarize it for me. You have to grab the content and feed it into ChatGPT. It has to be your input. So you would need to be subscribed to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, for example, access the article, let's say it's miles long, copy and paste the whole thing into ChatGPT. On the pro version or the paid version, you can upload articles. I'm not aware that it can go, I don't believe it can go behind paywalls on the pro version. And frankly, I don't know that I would trust it to. I would prefer to show it exactly what I want it to summarize. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so in addition to creating, yes, we've got personalizing. I mentioned you can make these additional versions that segment your audiences, which is a really great automation because I know many of us have been manually doing that for quite some time. We just spoke about this. You can have it summarize an article, a program description, etc., and ask it to extract the salient points for you. This could be really helpful if you are writing a case for support, and let's say it's for a really complex piece of medical equipment or an issue where there's layers and layers of complexities. Maybe it's something like a housing issue. And there's a lot of reports and studies about the housing issue in your region. You can share that information with ChatGPT and explain that you're looking for relevant data and facts that are relevant to your fundraising campaign, and it will search those and provide that summary as a high level summary for you to extract from for your fundraising materials. Analyze, I touched on this a little bit in the advanced section of ChatGPT use cases, but it definitely can identify trends, patterns, segments. It can create dashboard reports for you. Again, I would say Analyze is reserved for that paid version. And then Revise. I mentioned that as well. You can ask ChatGPT to proofread, revise for clarity, or rewrite things in a different tone. I will say we mentioned Grammarly at the start of this when we were sharing other platforms. Grammarly is a perfect example of another language-based generative AI platform, except for this one was specifically created and coded for writing and for content generation and sentence structure and word choice. So it might, in fact, be a better choice over ChatGPT. You really have to kind of play around and find the platform that works best for you. And quite frankly, you'll end up using more than one platform at a time. And, you know, something I didn't say earlier, but we're probably all using AI that is very similar to ChatGPT every day without necessarily realizing it. I know nowadays when you Google something, there's AI suggested responses at the top. When you scroll through your Facebook feed, there are AI generated questions and prompts that can summarize articles that show up in your feed, or can summarize even the comment section. So it is really surrounding us, and it's something that we are using and consuming on a daily basis, whether or not we realize it. So what better time than now to harness it and learn how to use it proactively. So let's talk about this concept of prompt engineering. So what is a prompt, first of all? So you visit chatgpt.com, and it has a nice little window for you to enter your prompt, which is really just your input, your ask. This is what you want ChatGPT to provide you. Obviously, the more detailed and specific you can get, the better your results will be. But how do you really get the most specific as possible and really guide the AI to do what you want? That is where prompt engineering comes into play. So prompt engineering sounds like a big kind of fancy word, but it's really just the practice of taking a moment to thoughtfully plan what your prompt will be, and potentially strategically kind of iterating that prompt with the AI. Key areas of prompt engineering are clarity, specificity, context, giving context to your ask, and sometimes even examples. I think this last sentence is kind of interesting. As much as we are training the AI to write for us and do tasks for us, we also are training ourselves to understand how exactly the AI interprets information we give to it, and how do we use that understanding to structure our approach to inputting into prompts. I will say, this will become more clear as we do some examples, but ChatGPT is technically learning. It is taking any information you put in there, any prompt you share with it, it retains it. And it may be used in future prompts or future outputs that are not yours. So for that reason, I know our industry is really looking at, the ethics of using ChatGPT and the safety and security of it. But for that reason, you'll see in some of the tips that come up next, use it as a tool. Put in, dummy names or dummy facts. Don't necessarily put, your donor's first name, last name, address, and complete giving history. I recognize it takes a couple of steps and removes some of the automation, but if you're uncertain about the security of how that data will be used, it's always helpful to kind of mask your information in your prompts. So we're going to go through a live example, but just an example to put on the screen for you right now. We talked about a prompt. We talked about an engineered prompt. A basic prompt is telling ChatGPT to write an appeal for my environmental nonprofit to solicit donors for our annual fund. It can do it. You'll get an annual appeal from this prompt, but it'll be probably quite templatized, and it could be applied to any environmental nonprofit and probably any nonprofit in general. The engineered prompt, much longer. There's a lot more text here. But the engineered prompt puts the ChatGPT in your seat, tells it, hey, you're a development director for our nonprofit now, and you need to write a persuasive annual fund appeal because we need to reach our fundraising goals. You also are telling in the engineered prompt, you're also telling the AI what your nonprofit does, who you are, and what exactly you're raising funds for right now. So this year, you're raising funds to expand the community-based reforestation project. You're taking it a step further. Yeah, an annual fund appeal is nice, but you want this annual fund appeal to focus on our achievements over the past year and explain how additional funding will make a significant impact. Now, in this example, we tell the AI to ask me questions in order to inform its output. That is such a useful tool, and it goes back to what I said earlier about the paid version's ability to handle more complex prompts. The free version does not ask you questions back. That's one, real kind of shortfall in it, in my opinion, because I find that I use the ask me questions all of the time, and you'll see how that becomes so helpful in the live example that we do. And then just kind of wrapping up this engineering prompt, it directly tells that AI what that annual fund appeal should look like. We wanted to have a heartfelt introduction. We wanted to describe our project. We want that urgent call to action. We've all probably written these letters. We know the ingredients that go into them. It tells it exactly how you want it to look. Use some bullet points, make it warm, and that the goal is you want to motivate donors to be generous and give money. So how did we come up with this engineered prompt? It seems, looking at it here, it seems like, yeah, of course, this is a better prompt than the basic one that you showed a few moments ago. But the act of sitting there and thinking through your prompt can sometimes feel overwhelming or intimidating because you know what you want to get out of it, but it can be tough to articulate that to AI. So we have created the craft method of crafting prompts. Of course, we love an acronym in this industry. And in fact, there are a couple of acronyms on, ChatGPT cheat sheets that you can find all over the internet. But this is one we've kind of refined for our purposes. So we're going to go through step by step. Okay, C, character. You're going to give the AI the role you want it to play. You want it to act as a person or an expert in a specific seat, so that it has the context and comes to the output, framing it from that perspective. So you saw in the example that we told the AI that it was the development director tasked with an annual fund appeal and needing to meet fundraising goals. And in this example, we tell it to act as a major gifts officer at a university. The request. So this is the kind of the meat of the prompt. I'm sorry, I need to move my screen over. So you want to make the request and be as specific as possible. So in this example that we're building together, you want the AI to draft a compelling email thanking a donor for their transformative gift to your campaign. At this stage of your prompt engineering, I recommend you go to A, adjust. So this is where you really want to refine your prompt. So add specific context. This is where you can prompt the AI to ask you questions. If you are using the free version, rather than have it ask you questions, put all of the context initially in your prompt. I'll show you how to do that. Here in this example, the gift was to our athletic center. We want the letter to focus on impact. Ask me questions to learn about that impact, to determine how the gift was used. It's got a character, you've made the request, and you've adjusted the request a bit. Then you want to specify the format. Do you want it to be organized into headers and subheaders? Do you want to use bullet points? Is there a specific word count or length? For example, this letter should be no longer than 1 page and should really use brief paragraphs. We know that, we do not want acknowledgement letters that are spilling onto 2 or 3 pages that are full of, blocks of text. We really want to get that gratitude across really quickly and efficiently. And then lastly, the tone. You've seen that mentioned in a few examples, but it's very important to tell the AI the tone that the output should embody. Remember, AI is a robot, and we want to do our best to curb that roboticness of what can come out of it. And I do have a few additional tips at the end of this presentation for that. But tone really helps to do that by setting the stage for how this should read to an audience. So in a acknowledgement letter, you want to use a familiar tone if it's a donor you've worked with over time, yet you always want to stay professional. And of course, you want to express gratitude. So let's think of this craft method and watch it in action. Bear with me while I change my screen, but because I've pre-recorded this use case of ChatGPT. So bear with me. Okay, I'm gonna walk us through this. Oh, give me 1 second. Is it still taking up your full screens? And actually, I realize I can't see you, but if anybody can unmute and say yes, that'd be helpful.
You're good, Kate.
Okay, perfect. All right. So you can see we are on ChatGPT. It even has some of the suggested prompts for personal and professional use, and we're starting our prompt. So we've told the AI the character. It's a major gifts officer at a university. We've made the request, draft a thank you email for a transformative gift to whatever the campaign's name is, or put XYZ campaign, and then customize it afterwards. We're going to adjust it now. So now we're giving that necessary context. It was to the athletic center. We want the letter to focus on impact. And then an additional layer of context is we are telling the AI to ask me questions about it. Now we're going to be telling the AI the format that we talked about. 1 page, brief paragraphs, clear and concise language. And then lastly, the tone, that familiar, grateful, professional tone. So the first thing it's going to do, because we told it to, is it's going to ask us questions. Now there's a lot of questions that it'll surface. It's not necessary to answer them all, but if you look through these, I believe it's going to be 6 questions. These are things that we know pretty offhand as fundraisers or as the person who'd be writing an acknowledgement letter. We know who the donor is. We know who the donor is. We know exactly why we solicited them for that gift to the athletic center. We know about milestones. We know about the impact it will have. So we can just give a brief response that will help ChatGPT shape the letter with a bit more personalization and a bit more depth to it. So you can see it's going to, sorry, let me move this out of the way.
There's a question in the chat. This is the paid version, right? But I think the functionality in this case, it's asking you questions, and you mentioned that would not be with the free version.
Right. So, well, I'm going to get into that right now. So if you were using the free version, the input that I've input now as answers to the question, you would want to give that at the start of your prompt. So you would want to put it in the beginning where you say the gift is to the athletic center. It's from an alumnus. He's been giving at increasing levels since he graduated. You want this all in there. Personally, I find that I don't always think of that information. So the ask me questions prompt helps me get in the mindset of, well, what information do I need to think about and provide to make the best output possible? And it really kind of it prompts me to be thinking about the appropriate information to include. Is there a second question? Oh, okay. Okay, so let's look through this. Hold on, this will pop off in a second. So we've answered the questions, we've added the context. We've got Leonardo DiCaprio as the donor. He's an alumnus, been giving at increasing levels. His largest gift ever is this $10 million to name the new athletic center. We talk about the impact that it'll have. Again, things we know because we're working on campus. We know it's going to host basketball and hockey games. We know we're the only college campus in the region without one. And this new building will really propel us to new heights. We know there's a groundbreaking ceremony at the end of the year. These are things we talk about in the office on the daily, right? So you can see it updated its memory. So if you do go back in a couple of days and ask ChatGPT to write you another letter or talk about the athletic center, it will remember those points about it. So here we have it drafting the letter. It'll scroll back up in a minute. But it's using the information we provided, but just shaping it a little bit better for us. Let's let it complete. Again, it's hit the format we wanted. It has really brief, succinct paragraphs. This should fit on one page. The third paragraph, if you take a look at that, your contribution addresses a critical need. So we talked about focusing on impact, making the donor feel like they had a transformative impact. So addressing a critical need and putting that back on the recipient of the letter, your contribution did this, is exactly what we wanted the AI to do for us in this example. We also mentioned, that ceremony, and we use that as an opportunity to put another call to action. We want you to join us. Now, of course, we all know as fundraisers that hopefully you're not thanking your $10 million, named level donor in a simple letter. Hopefully you're doing a lot more, but for the purposes of illustrating this, I thought this was the most easy to understand. So take a look at this. Kind of keep it in mind as we go through just a couple more slides. I think there's one or two. I want to draw back on this letter as an example. Now, if you didn't like this letter, or you thought it needed to expand more on, why colleges need an athletic center, or you wanted to add more gratitude, you can iterate with ChatGPT and say, change the tone, infuse more language of gratitude, add facts about athletics at colleges. You can go back and forth a few times. Even on the free version, it does have, a limited memory where it will remember the conversation you are in, provided that you're having the conversation in a shorter period of time, not coming back to it 3 days later. But it will work with you. That's what I mentioned earlier, to be conversational with the ChatGPT. You can definitely refine the output both in the system, in ChatGPT with it, and outside of the system, which is what we're going to look at in just a minute. And I was right, we only have 2 more slides. And then we can do some questions and answer. All right. So just a couple more tips to bring it all together. You mentioned the character, the role play. It's so important when you open up that blank ChatGPT screen, you're using this AI as a tool. Tell it exactly what you want it to be. What is it serving as for you? Is it a writing coach? Is it a professional fundraiser? Is it a recruiter evaluating, a candidate that you're hiring for? Is it a donor themselves? You could have it take on the persona of a major donor or a philanthropist, to really kind of go back and forth on how to customize communications in a way that might resonate with donors. So really always give it a job to do. I mentioned this a couple of times, but don't be afraid of Q&A. You definitely want to have conversation. That's why it's a chat bot. As kind of creepy and scary as that may seem, it really does help, because we as humans are used to solving problems through conversation and going back and forth. So that's why the chatbot is designed that way, because it's what works for us. I mentioned before, encourage it to ask you questions or iterate on prompts a couple of times before you get your final product. Always provide context. I think that was very clear, even in the simplest of a prompt. If you just add an additional sentence of context as to why you're asking for this or what it means, it will use that and really expand upon it. chunk it out. So if you think you've got kind of a more complex need, maybe it is something related to putting together a lot of content for a grant proposal, organizing your thoughts to inform your development plan. Go one by one. Find simpler, more manageable parts, and then put them together after the fact. And perhaps most important, I can't stress this enough, remember that ChatGPT is a tool, not a replacement. You will almost never, ever be able to take the result of ChatGPT and simply copy and paste it and move on. Almost everything that it puts out, you should spend time personally refining for the best product, but also because we know about ChatGPT now. We're on the lookout for AI generated content, and sometimes that can be a red flag. There are some studies out there that have shown that humans are already pretty adept at recognizing the distinct style of AI generated language. There's a couple of examples that have been uncovered. I think one really good one is that when you ask it to write a letter or an email, it almost always starts out with, I hope this email finds you well. I hope this letter finds you well. And so while we also tend to use that, as we're writing emails personally, it can be a flag that, hey, maybe this was some AI generated language, and a really astute reader might keep an eye out for that. So what you really want to do is use it as your starting point and really polish your output. You want to make sure it sounds like you. So the very first thing I recommend, and I do this for almost everything that I get out of ChatGPT, is read it out loud. Yes, I see an additional question, and I will get to that right after these bullet points. So read it out loud. Make sure it doesn't sound robotic. Make sure it sounds like something you would have created. So you're going to want to look out for vocabulary that doesn't match your style or won't resonate with your audience. Typically, ChatGPT does have a tendency to include big words, some superfluous language, and you just want to look for that, and you'll find that if you remove those or shorten some sentences, the meaning is still there. The piece has not changed much. It's just become a bit more human. Another key thing that ChatGPT does is it tends to have a lot of adjectives. It's a little bit flowy in its language. So look out for excess adjectives and even repetition, like a second or third sentence that's saying the prior sentence in the same way. You might not need that. Again, add your personal details, especially if you put in dummy information or XYZ. Adding the personal details makes it naturally start to take on a more human element because your language comes into play as you're doing that. Look for opportunities to make sentences less stiff. That's really why you want to read it out loud in the first place. If it sounds like a long, meandering SAT word sentence, it's probably going to be obvious that it's AI. So you want to look for opportunities to slim that down or replace that with common vernacular that you use. One trick that was recommended to me, and it is a good one, I've used it plenty of times, in your engineered prompt, when you're speaking on the tone, you can tell ChatGPT to limit its verbiage to a 10th grade reading level or the writing level of a college senior. And sometimes I do find that actually really helps to eliminate things like the excess adjectives and the words that wouldn't necessarily make sense in your day-to-day conversations. So let's see. Okay, 2 questions in the chat so far, and then I think, let me just double check. I think that is the end of our presentation. So I'm going to turn off the slide so I can see everybody when I answer these questions. Okay. So the first question that's in the chat now is, can you talk about providing prepared content and asking ChatGPT to revise it in a better tone, etc.? So yeah, you can absolutely do this. I think that falls under the category of revising and creating. So in the paid version, it's a bit easier because there's an attachment button, just like an email, and you can attach, 2 or 3 letters and say, refine these in a more professional tone, or you could even attach letters that are in your tone of voice already, and then add into the prompt, hey, here's a letter that was written for me by my colleague. please refine it to better match my existing writing tone, which you can find in these 3 examples. And in the paid version, actually, you can kind of train ChatGPT over time to recognize your writing style. But you can do the same thing in the free version. You can copy and paste. Hey, this is what you would say. You'd say, I would like you to refine a letter based on my writing style and infuse a more warm tone into the letter. First, I'm going to send you an example of a letter I've written previously that does this well. And you can send that prompt off and it will say, great, please share with me the letter that you've written previously. You can copy and paste that, send it off to the AI. Then it will say, okay, and what is the letter that you would like me to refine and revise into this style? And then you would copy and paste that content, and then it will give you the output. So that kind of goes back to chunking it out. I find you have to chunk it out a little bit more on the free version because you're limited to just inputting text that you have to copy and paste. So if you're running into roadblocks with that on the free version, chunk it out. Do one step at a time and always tell the AI what the steps are in between each step. So now I'm going to send you this. Wait to give me output until you receive that. Always give it directions like you're talking to a child, of giving it step 1, step 2, step 3. Hopefully that helps answer your questions, Sarah. A second question I see is, as you refine your query, are there any concerns with sharing information with ChatGPT about donors, or is that proprietary? No, that's a fair concern. ChatGPT, every version, is retaining all information that we've put into it. It is an open source platform, and I don't know enough about how that memory could be used, but the best practice, I would say, in our line of work, especially with so much protected donor information, is whenever possible, use dummy information. Of course, if you want to do some automations, let's say you want to upload a list of 500 lie bunts and you want the appeal letter to be customized for each of them, use Razor's Edge ID and then go back and add the names after. And there are ways you can do that in Microsoft Excel, but you can put all the information there without exactly lining it up with true names and true identifying characteristics. And yes, regarding sharing the slides, we are recording it and we'll make that available. We can also just share the slide deck as well. That craft framework is really helpful to kind of have printed out. I had it on a Post-it note for like 8 months in horrible handwriting. And I was like, I think I know it by now. So I finally threw it away. Let's see. Can ChatGPT do prospect research? I would say, so theoretically, yes, but I would say no, not for our application. ChatGPT's system is currently limited to information that is on the internet up to September of 2021. Now, that's nothing we're strangers to, because it seems that most of our prospect research tools are also sometimes a year or 2 behind. So you're limited in what's out there. And I also find that it's more of a general kind of language-based tool. And that's why creating, revising, summary are its strong spots. I personally think there are other better platforms for prospect research. Of course, many of the companies that we use today are already incorporating AI into their work, like the wealth screening companies and the databases with charitable contributions. But I mentioned at the top of the call a similar platform called Perplexity, which has a similar user interface to ChatGPT in that it's structured like a chatbot. You can chat back and forth with it, but it is known for its research capabilities. So I believe that it has, a greater and more accurate depth of penetration into sources on the internet than ChatGPT has. I would say I've not found ChatGPT very successful in developing a prospect research profile. Are there other questions?
Kate, if you don't mind putting that last slide back up. in case there are
Oh,
questions,
yeah.
we can field them. I want to make sure everybody has your contact information there. Um,
Yeah. And if anything here, piqued your interest and you're interested in kind of some one-on-one kind of coaching about how to use tools like this, happy to help in that way. My cell phone number and email is here. um, Fun fact, this is the first webinar I've ever given, so I explicitly did not want a feedback form to pop up because I am a millennial and take critical feedback or negative feedback. But if you have nothing to say, please feel free to email me. Of course, if you have critical feedback too, I will take that. And we are doing, thanks to Michelle, we are doing a lot more in terms of industry education, webinars, and events. We have a joint webinar coming up with McAllister and Quinn in the fall about federal funding in higher ed. But also tell us what else we could talk to you about. If you have any ideas of content, whether it's in person or webinar, just shoot an email to info@theangeletti group, and we're happy to take a look. We always appreciate ideas.
Kate, I want to say I think I speak on behalf of all of us. You did a fantastic job. So I think we're getting a lot of, positive comments, and we thank everyone for joining us. The poll did indicate that about half of the audience came directly from our outreach and maybe the other half didn't. So I just want to put it out there that if you would like to join our mailing list, you can either email that info email. We also have a link on our homepage to join or subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out about quarterly, but just to make sure you would get notified of upcoming additional webinars that we're going to probably be planning into the fall. So just a little note there. But yeah, I think this was great, and I'm so happy that it came together and we had an engaged audience with lots of questions. And it's a very exciting topic that, yes, I think exponentially will infiltrate everybody's work as time goes on. So
Thank you for all the nice words in the chat. I appreciate them, and I need them. I feed off of them. So
I'm going to stop the recording now, but thank you all.
thanks so much. Feel